Hello, everybody. This is Rich, and you are watching This Imaginary Life. It's kind of like a car talk type show, except we're going to talk about RPGs. We have decades of experience, GMs and players here. So I'm gonna bring on alphabetically. So we'll start with Jen. How are you doing tonight, Jen?
I'm very good, thank you.
And next we have John Stavropoulos. How are you, John?
Wonderful.
Fantastic. And then fresh off of a train, we have Judd. How are you, Judd?
I'm well.
Good. And then our special guest, who maybe she likes it enough to come back later, is Rachel. How are you doing, Rachel?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Fantastic. So as we normally start with This Imaginary Life, we will start off with stuff that we're into. So we're going to talk about gaming stuff that excites us, and each of us are timed. And we have a nice group here. So we're going to do 1 minute and 30 seconds. I've got the timer ready to go. High tech Android software on a Samsung Galaxy. So it's spare no expense. And then everybody goes, and if somebody has a quick question after that, cool. But this way we don't blather on and on and on and on, because that's what they do on the Jankcast, right, Jen?
I mean, I don't.
Sorry, I can't say that they do that on the Sons of Kryos because no one knows.
No one knows.
No one knows.
So sad.
Oh.
All right, so anybody ready to go?
I'll go. I'll go.
All right, go for it, Judd. You're on the clock.
All right, ready?
Yep, go.
All right. See, you ready?
Go.
All right. Here's the game idea that I just wrote down notes for. All right. All the stuff about 3.5 and 3.0 that I hate, where you have to build a character as you go, you totally get rid of that, but you kind of make it a big part of the game. Because in this sci-fi universe where you use D20, 3 point whatever, you can transfer your consciousness into a prefab body. So you're not building characters as you go. You build a body with levels, right? And the higher the level, the harder the body is to smuggle into a planet. So there are a bunch of prefab bodies that come with the book or whatever it is, and then you can kind of like mod them, like people mod cars. People mod bodies in this world like they mod cars. You can just stick your consciousness right in, and you can build a body for a particular mission, and then send it into the planet. Maybe it gets intercepted, so you send like more than one body, right? And it's like there's some kind of resource for sending, how many levels bodies in for a certain mission, and then you get XP. And then you don't have to do that crap where like you slowly go up levels and build a character over the course of some weird long stretch of years. And because you made a mistake with your feats at 3rd level, it's totally shafted, and you're never going to be great because you were dumb. And that's my way I solved my 3.5 problem. Bam, done.
Amazing. That's impressive. I wish you hadn't gone first. Okay.
That's not as bad as the time I went first and I talked about like this beautiful game I had with my dad, and I nearly cried, and then everyone else was like, "What the hell is we gonna do next?"
Oh,
anyway.
that's so good.
But anyway,
All right, cool.
that's my shtick. I wrote notes for it on the train on my way here, so it's on my mind. It's fresh.
That's so cool. All right, whoa, wait, what'd I do? The thing is gone. A button happened.
Why'd you do that?
Okay, there we go. All right, I'm going to go. So I am going to talk quickly about, so for Christmas I'm saying so over and over. I am running a Star Wars game over Play by Post, solo game using Apocalypse World rules, which are really fun. And I know an artist on the internet named Tim Henson, and he did a commission of the crew for this group, and now it's done. We just literally I got the crew, and it took a while from the point when we talked about the commission to where another character became a member of the crew who was kind of an erstwhile merc, and now she's part of the crew, and I paid him a little bit extra, and he inserted that person into the crew, and now they're like, it's the most amazing picture. And now I'm worried that they all have plot immunity in my head because I don't want to kill any of these awesome crew members. So I'm like, oh crap, I can't kill them because they're in the picture that I love. The other thing is I'm going to be running Lacuna on the 27th for the Indie Plus crew. I don't know why that just decided to blank out. And I'm pretty excited about it. I did a little primer script for a primer video that hopefully other people can use when they're going to run Lacuna over Hangout, because it's just going to explain how to make characters and everything. And I actually learned 2 rules I had wrong, so that was pretty amazing. That I've run the Lacuna probably 10 times wrong. But I'll run it righter now. And I've got 6 seconds to say that Tim Henson's art is amazing. And it makes me super happy to have those characters. There we go. Who is next, John or Jen?
Jen.
I mean, I guess I can go. I don't know if I actually have 90 seconds worth of stuff.
Well, it's okay. If you don't, then I'll just stop and hit reset.
Okay.
And I think you do. Go.
Okay. Yeah, so I actually have 2 different things, but they're both dungeon worlds, so they relate, right? So, you guys, I'm playing this Chain World game with Indie Plus, and Mark Diaz Truman ran the game where rocks fell and I died. Rocks fell and I died. Like, I mean, seriously. But then Death was like this auditor person and gave me a citation for dying on the wrong plane, and that was super cool. So that was really fun. The other Dungeon World thing is I actually was talking to a couple of coworkers, and one of them has played like Traveler, D&D Pathfinder. The other one has never played an RPG ever. And I was like, you guys, I have to run Dungeon World for you. And it's like, it's weird because I've been in indie RPGs so long that trying to conceptualize it from an absolute beginner newbie standpoint is like hurting my brain a little bit. Like, it's awesome. Just believe me. It's awesome. So, yeah, that's my thing. I can't actually see the timer, so I don't know how long I have left.
You've got 30 seconds.
Okay.
25.
Yeah, bless you. I don't really have anything else.
That's okay.
Sorry.
No, good job. Good job. Sweet. Now we lead to John. You ready to go, John?
I'm ready.
You are on the clock. Go.
Excellent. The thing I'm most excited about in gaming right now is a Kickstarter called Pillion, which is a game where you play baby dragons trying to save the world. It's based on the Apocalypse World game system, but adds nice twists to it, where you have resources that you can pass between players that reinforce various themes that you're interested in playing in the game. And it's a game made by Marissa Kelly. It's available on Kickstarter right now. And if you love dragons and let's say gaming is not your thing, one thing that's really cool about it is it's releasing a deck of cards which includes original art of different dragons that are very beautiful, and I'll try to pull up an example on my phone in a second. And this deck of cards are characters you can introduce as a person running the game, so that you can have lots of different variety of dragons. So you don't have to make up a dragon on the fly. You can have different colored dragons with different textures on them. And let's see if I can pull up.
Ooh.
Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Very cool. And that's all I have to say about that.
Nice. Okay, you did about the same time as Jen. Good job.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. I'm going to step and roll back and let you guys know that this show is now part of the Indie Plus network. So Indie Plus is a fantastic, cool collection of people who are excited about indie games, and this show does follow the community standards set forth by Indie Plus that you can find on indieplus.org. Just search for community standards there. It should be in the top bar at the bar at the top there. You should be able to find the community standards and read all about that. So now let's go to our main event. Our special guest Rachel posed a question on Google Plus about ending a game. Rachel, you want to kind of walk us through your query?
Sure. So yeah, I just posted a question a few weeks ago about what do you do to end a game full of charged situations? Because I mean, I think most of us have found ourselves in this situation where either it's a one-shot or the agreed upon end of a session or a campaign, and you're getting towards the end. It's either the last session or the last hour, and there's still a lot going on. So what do you do to end things in a way that's as satisfying as possible to everyone? So that was my question, and we got lots of interesting answers, and then decided to talk about it here. So.
Yes, I'm really excited that you asked that question, and the discussion on that thread was pretty fantastic. But because you wisely want to have a kind of a private post so people feel more comfortable talking about it, so we'll reshare some of that. And John Stavropoulos, you had a really cool answer on that one. Do you want to kind of lead off with your bit?
Sure. Were you referring to the epilogues or the cards?
We hit both of those because those are both really great ideas.
Sure, excellent. So, in terms of how to end games, usually, especially when run games at conventions, I like to end about 10 minutes before the game slot's over. And one of the things that I learned from playing lots of different games is people tend to remember what happened at the beginning of the game and what happened at the end of the game. Right? So what I try to do is I try to make the last bit of the game as awesome as possible. And one of the ways to do that is for me to give the players as much control as possible, because I can't read their minds. I don't know what sort of things that they wanted to do that they might have not had time to do. So what I do is I end 10 minutes early, and I say, okay, we're going to do epilogues. In these epilogues, we're not going to use any of the mechanics. We're not going to have to roll for anything. Just let us know what happens. And what happens could be seconds after the last scene. It could be minutes. It could be days. It could be months. It could be years. It could be centuries. Whatever makes sense. Just tell us what happens to your character, 2-3 minutes. If it's something that involves someone else's character, just ask their permission or work with them and you can do a scene together, and then just go for it. And then what ends up happening is instead of just having one ending, every player crafts their own custom ending where if there were things that they wanted to do in the game that they didn't get to, they can wrap it all up. And then it just feels like the entire session was a complete story that they leave satisfied with. The second thing I do sometimes, usually this takes a little bit more time, so I'll end about 20 minutes before the end of the game, is I'll pass index cards to the different players, and I'll ask them to write down something their character wishes would happen and something they as a player wish would happen, right? Because maybe they wish as a player something that would happen that would be horrible and tragic to their characters, right? That the character might not want. So they write two things down: what their character wants and what they want. And they all pass me the index cards back, right? So it's all private. And then I look at the information, and then I craft like a grand conclusion that incorporates details from everyone's input. So that way, they told me what they wanted, but because I'm getting information from all of the players, it's not exactly clear how it's going to end. So it's still surprising, still unique, and still satisfying.
Now, I have a question about this index card bit. Do you, at the point that you mix everything together,
Mm-hmm.
I assume you take a few minutes and you
Yes.
mix all this together, are you just narrating the end?
No, I'll still have mechanics. So, and that's usually why I'll end about 20 minutes before the end of the slot, because it's a little bit more involved. And usually, like, let's say it's a game like a world game, right? I will have like each player will have do like 1 or 2 rolls. We'll try to keep it minimize one scene. And what the input does is it sets the stakes of what we're doing, right? So let's say someone really wants to get into a huge fight against their arch nemesis, right? So I'll know, okay, we're going to do a fight roll with this character, and the stakes here are, one of them is not going to survive this, right? Because of the input I've collected. So we'll still do rolls, but it'll be very much focused on what the players said that they wanted. And I try to combine things as much as possible. So if, let's say, Judd and Rachel had very similar ideas, I do everything I can, since we don't have a lot of time, to connect them, to combine them wherever possible.
That's really neat. Funny story about epilogues. I've used that before in con games, and I think it's really useful there. But I decided, since I had a play-by-post where some of the players were just kind of having some life struggles, and the post frequency was dropping off, I said, hey, you know what? This is a good stopping point. Let's do epilogues. However, because that was it's time elapsed, so it went from like in this long lull, and it was almost like people were all trying to grab the top of the bat, and like, you post your epilogue first. So yeah, it's less time-sensitive epilogues. Maybe you need to have a bit more of a rule about who should post and how quick. Otherwise, epilogues in a live game have been pretty successful. Any other ideas, Judd, Jen? Jen, you run a lot of stuff at Games on Demand. What are your thoughts on this?
I could go both ways, right? My cheaty trick for one-shots is just like to aim, like to make it as what am I trying to say here? Like I've used like pattern recognition or oh my god, words, English. I'm sorry, I'm tired. I try and weave everything together. Is what I'm trying to say. In a super cheap, cliche kind of way because it's a one-shot and like you don't have time to be clever in a one-shot. So if somebody's looking for something the whole game, they're gonna find it in the end, and that person will have to do with somebody else's thing, right? And the other thing that I do that's sort of cheap, and sometimes people don't like it, is I end in cliffhangers because it's interesting to me. I try not to be like super cheap about it, like, oh, the person you've loved this entire game is about to get their throat slit, and who knows what happened. Like, that's just mean. But I like to leave. I like to smash cut at the end because I find that fun.
You shouldn't feel bad. I love cliffhanger endings. It's great. I once had a Lady Blackbird game that we ended like a French movie. Like, literally, just credits rolled, and there was so much unresolved, it was kind of, like, painful.
Nice.
So one of the things I want to kind of throw out is something that Ryan Macklin taught me. He specifically did it in Don't Rest Your Head, because in Don't Rest Your Head it was pretty easy. It was kind of like formulaic for him. But what he did was he kind of charted out the pain. So in Don't Rest Your Head, the GM only has one stat for all obstacles or opposition, and that is pain, which I love, the idea of just I'm rolling pain. But what he did was he kind of just chart out his pain rolls in his head and make sure that as you got near the end of the time, he was headed towards a 10 pain. So everything ended in like the big boss fight. And that's great for more action-oriented games. But I've stolen from that quite a bit. Kind of the 13th Age escalation die as well, trying to make sure the stakes get higher, 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 and then you end on some kind of die roll giant fight. That's one of the things that I like to do.
Another idea is to just really run it right into the ground until like everybody loves the game, but they don't want to say to stop, but they just keep showing up out of like a sense of obligation, and then it just bleeds into your interpersonal relationships and friendships and messes everything up, and then just like let it just metastasize and kind of build momentum until like it's this thing between you all. And then, people are canceling out of the game, and you're not sure why, and you're not sure if they're really even your friends anymore, and just let it just build up into this unspoken, terrible, wonderful thing, and then block them all from all of your social media and stop talking to them. I mean, that's one way to go. It's not.
Not ideal.
It's not. Well, I don't know about ideal. I don't want to judge any way anyone games, right? But it's not in any books, but it's out there, and it gets used a lot. I mean, I definitely see it.
So what you're saying, Judd, is end early before it all just kind of becomes a thing you don't want to do anymore.
That might be what I'm saying, John. That might have been the moral of that story. If you have to spell it out for people, sure. If you want to ruin it, John, if you want to ruin my little play act, fine.
So Judd, you would say maybe pitch just a 3-session game, that way it ends quickly before everyone hates each other?
Right. Or you could try to do a 3-session game and then just do a really busted first session and then have everybody cancel on the second and then never play again. Like, that's another way to go. Just let it just fester.
That's an early fester. That's like... Oh, man. John, you were going to ask me a question when I talked about the escalation stuff, I thought.
Oh, I wanted to follow up with some things Jen said. So, Jen, you mentioned, like, looking for patterns, wrapping things up, closing loose ends, things of that nature. And so I know for me, when I run a game, I like to try to do that as much as I can. Sometimes it's hard to remember all the different bits that were left unresolved or whatever it is. So sometimes when I run games, what I'll do is I'll put index cards or stickies on the table, and I'll kind of write down like elements that we're introducing as we're playing. So what are some like popular locations that we keep going to? What are some NPCs that are reoccurring? What are some unanswered questions that we haven't hit yet? And that way, when we have a bunch of this on the table, that's open for everyone, other players can add to it. So, like, if there was an unanswered question that that I completely forgot about, I can turn around and say to everyone, okay, let's take a break. After everyone comes back from the break, let's look at what we have on the table. Is there anything missing? Is there anything we really want to get to? Is there anything we don't really care about anymore? We can just kind of push to the side. It doesn't even matter. And that way, it's another way of getting everyone focused collaboratively, and it also ensures that we know what details people care about wrapping up.
Cool. Rachel, I want to kind of bounce back to you. And Judd had something. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, go ahead.
So talk about some of the ways that you've ended, because you didn't come at this like, I don't know how to end a game. I know you run a lot of games. So what are some of your favorite techniques for ending games?
Well, I think one of the things that prompted me to write the post in the first place was because I agree with John and Jen that reincorporation is awesome, and I think I tend to use epilogues, especially for one-shots. But there's times where the epilogue thing is less than satisfying for two reasons. Because if depending on where you or what you do with epilogues or where you end things, you can end up making it feel like the end is just a pasted on thing because it doesn't relate. Like, to play the game, you've all agreed to these rules of playing a game together, and you've agreed that you're telling a story with these rules. So when you start epiloguing, if you go too far with it, or if it doesn't really mesh with what you've been doing, it just feels like a different game or a different story sometimes. Like, if you've been striving really hard to get to some end, and then all of a sudden, you epilogue this epic kind of thing for your character, it just feels like different. It's not bad. It's sometimes a little bit not as satisfying, I guess. And the second problem that it sometimes has is it sends people off in a bunch of different directions, and if you've had characters that are interacting in really interesting ways, sometimes the players don't collaborate on an end, and then it kind of feels like what you had, that special something, just gets dispersed in your stories, and suddenly it's not about what we did, it's about all these little separate things. So I was thinking about it, like, what can we do to either make epilogues more satisfying or to get to a point where we don't need to rely quite as heavily on them. And I think a lot of it is, I think the conclusion, I guess, that I came to is that it is a collaborative thing. Like, it can't be just on the GM's shoulders. And it's something that starts, well, if it's a one-shot, it pretty much starts at the beginning of play. If it's a season or campaign play, it's going to start towards the end, where everyone needs to agree to, kind of like what John was saying, what's important, what matters, and focus on that. Because if you don't take the moment to figure that out, you might have it go in different directions, and it's going to be way too difficult to wrap up. Especially with particular games like Apocalypse Engine games tend to have this trouble because the moves tend to snowball in that, so it's hard to get to a point where things just stop.
I feel like with Apocalypse World, you've really got to use non-escalating techniques that are in that MC toolbook. It's like it's time to stop bringing future badness, and start asking a lot of questions and that kind of thing, I would think.
So yeah. It sounds like using some of what you guys were talking about with like a world style game and a lot of game mechanics. A lot of the game mechanics, because you're playing a session, the results of those mechanics have forward momentum, right? So like it's the kind of thing where if you run away, if you roll to run away from something, one of the mixed results might be you run into something worse. And so then there's a question is, how do you take a mechanic that's normally meant to push the game continually forward and twist that into something that actually concludes the game?
Right.
And that's a challenge.
Or it's a custom move, I mean, those games are riddled with custom moves, so maybe it's like, hey guys, for this game, I'm changing all the moves, and all the escalation things are going to be something else, and you just make custom moves out of it. All those games are just like the MC is writing custom moves all the time for all these weird little places. So by that point, you should be pretty comfortable, hopefully, with saying, all right, I'm going to change these escalation moves into something else. I think you can put that onus on the players a lot. If I was playing Dungeon World or D&D or whatever, and the players had just beaten up Orcus and Tiamat at the gates of hell, and we had one more week left, I wouldn't try to top that. I would say I would just do something kind of quietly dramatic. There's not a lot of nice quietly dramatic ways to do it, where you say, you start the session and you say, your characters go down in history, but and there are a lot of different historians who argue about you guys, but the one thing the historians agree on is that this night was the last time you were all together. Now have a good time playing. And that puts it on them. It's like, if you have something you want to get done, get it done. This is it. This was the last time you were all together in the same room. And it can be it's sad, and it gives them a nice endpoint, rather than Tiamat's sister and Orcus's older brother come, and we try to recapture that magic.
I feel like you have something really important there, right? You want to get to a satisfying end. The idea is to not end it with something inconsequential or boring or whatever, right? You give weight to the thing that's the conclusion. You don't want to see them having breakfast the next morning. That's dumb. But yeah, no, going to a Great Hall, and yes, this is the last time you guys are here. It's not big boss fight, but it's really important.
Well, it sounds like to tie in a couple of things people were saying, what Judd was talking about, a custom move, right? We're gonna roll this move towards the end of the game. What are the results that make sense here? And I would point out to two things. One, even the moves as is could create cliffhanger endings, kind of like Jen was talking about before, right? So this whole idea, where you're running away from the big exploding thing, and then you run into something worse, that actually could be an amazing way to end, right? Because that adds a really cool cliffhanger. If you don't want to do cliffhangers and you do want to do custom moves, to tie it back into what we were saying before, is normally a GM would make a custom move. Normally a GM would say, here's this custom move. When you do it really awesome, this can happen. When it's a mixed result, this can happen. And when you fail, this happens. Instead of having the GM do all that, you can you can get everyone to participate together and say, okay, great. Well, this is the last thing you're going to roll for your character, right? What happens if we roll 10+? What happens if we roll 7 to 9, right? Let's make this epic. Let's be very clear what's going to happen before the dice hit the table. And then, it creates all that drama.
Yeah, and I've tried the tact of making sure we all know where things are time-wise in the game. Okay, we have an hour left, and that never works. People just aren't good about it's too abstract. What John's talking about. Making it a thing that you're sinking your teeth into as far as it relating to the game is what works. One of the best pieces of advice that I saw on that thread that I started from Brand Robbins is after the halfway point, no new information. It's just across the board, everybody agrees to this. At that point, you're reincorporating stuff that's already happened, characters, events that are introduced, and you deal with that stuff. And I think it's a pretty nice, simple way to handle it, especially with games that tend to have moves or mechanics that bring in new stuff. But that was one of my favorite things that I heard.
Thanks for bringing that up. I thought that was great. Joe Beeson's answer was really funny. He said basically don't let it come to a successful conclusion, because then players will always remember that one game that they didn't get what they wanted. From then on, all other games they will seek conclusion to that amazing game that he ran. I'm paraphrasing. It was quite amusing. So the one thing that I have that's kind of interesting for ending games, actually, John Stavropoulos is a little bit of an example of a possibility. He played in a Contessa game back in the very first Contessa that ran really, really well and wasn't headed towards an end, and then they just picked it back up and played again. I mean, with Hangouts, I know, right, you don't want to overcommit, but maybe if a game's that amazing that you don't want it to end, you just schedule a follow-up Hangout and keep going. I don't know. I mean, I like conventions to build potential game groups, even if they're really focused around one particular game.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen games at conventions where all the players took their characters with them, and they said even if the GM wasn't going to be there for the next game, they're like, hey, why do we have to stop playing?
Just being a contrarian, but I've seen it happen. It's pretty cool. Well,
Yeah,
are there
that's awesome.
any other?
We must have satisfying endings. None of this, oh, we can always pick it up nonsense.
Yes, I agree.
I was raised on American television, where you got to get to 100 episodes, get to syndication. So
Did my cautionary tale mean nothing to you, Rich? Nothing? Were you even listening? Are your headphones working?
Yeah. No, I completely agree that, yeah, it's really hard to recapture the magic, especially if you have the magic. You're running games on demand, you run 5 games in one day, and that magic happens 4 of the 5 times. You can't really commit to it, so you got to end it. It makes sense. That's just what I don't like about conventions. It's like I have all these amazing stories, and I don't want them to end, and they're always like there in a pregnant moment of amazing, and they didn't. It's like the show was canceled. It breaks my heart. It's like Farscape all over again. Well, do we have anything that we can do here? Should we bring this to an end, or do we have other endings to campaigns or games that we want to talk about?
I want to say one thing about John's suggestion is that I think you want to be really careful about having one move define the end. I just that would be a really tricky move to write. I think John made it sound simple, and it isn't. That would be kind of difficult, and I just wanted to throw caution at that idea. I think it's a great idea if it's a really well-written, interesting move, but I think we want to be wary of, 10 plus, my character's happy and fulfilled, 7 to 9, it's all right, 6 minus, misery. Okay, who's next character?
I feel like
I think I just wrote a game, by the way. Go on, Jen, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I feel like the custom end move like that would work really well if all of the characters have the same communal goal, right? If they're all going for the same thing, right, one move can totally do it. But in a game of Monster Hearts where everybody's kind of doing their own thing, there's not one move that you can make up that would satisfactorily end a Monster Hearts game. I don't think.
Yeah, probably if rocks fall, everyone dies. It's not going to work. So
I was going to add that there's also different types of games, right? Like there are games that are more about travel and exploration, and some of them, if they kind of just fade out, it's okay. But the other end of things, where you might have more of a sandbox game that you're playing at a convention, you can help avoid the difficult end by making it tightly focused at the beginning. So I think your end is going to be determined a little bit by how you start. So any of those sandbox games or games that have a lot of charged situations, like Urban Shadows has a lot going on with it. any Apocalypse World type games do often, you can focus in on particular pieces or particular moments of a story and play, a 3 or 4 hour game on that easily. You don't have to have all of the bells and whistles.
Yeah, I agree. I think Rachel's on to what I was going to say next, which is a lot of this can be mitigated by how you start the game. And if you start it with like, hey, there's an endpoint out there, whether it's 2 sessions, 3 sessions, 100 sessions away, it's there. This is kind of where it is, and this is where we're moving towards. The other thing is ending doesn't have to mean, it can be the end of a chapter. You can play a game where you move retire those characters, move the timeline 10 years ahead, switch GMs, make new characters who have been affected by what the old characters did, and then play something else. Like that can be another way to kind of keep everybody satisfied, but end something, like feel like you've created something that has an end, and not have to feel that pressure of like bringing everything to this satisfying close where it's a generational story and things kind of move on, and your characters had an effect on the world, and all those roles meant something, and now we're playing in the world they made. That shit, I froze up.
You're
You're
back.
good now.
Okay.
You came right back when you cursed. It was awesome.
Fantastic. So anyway, there are more than one ways to end, I guess. You can end a book, you can end a chapter. Just think about it that way. Yes.
Blaze in the Dark has a pretty cool idea of putting a countdown clock on accomplishing a particular heist or an objective. Maybe that's something that you could incorporate in other games. Is just have a little clock that you're ticking off the pieces to, and as you get closer and closer, either you do it or you don't. The stakes go up, and I guess I'm kind of rephrasing my escalating to the big giant finish type deal. But it's an interesting part of Blaze in the Dark for me, I think.
Yeah. I remember that there's this thing in one of the original Ars Magica books where the campaign that they set up in the book is set in southern France, and there was this thing coming in history called the what was it, the Albigensian Crusade or the Cathar Crusade, and everybody agreed that when that hit, their covenant was just going to be wiped out. There was nothing they could do, and so they were playing until that year. And that's neat to play with, to play on the Titanic is kind of cool. It's like, you can drink all the martinis you want, but it's still going to hit the iceberg. And I think that's kind of interesting. It gives everything this kind of bittersweet quality, and that could be really cool too. So that's another, I think, variation on know that you're ending when you begin, and set those expectations. But that's hard. I feel like so much of the media that we take in is its success is measured in it not ending, right? I mean, Rich said it with syndication, right? So many of our media are like, well, comic books and movies and movie franchises and books and book series. Ending can be this like symbol of failure, and I feel like that's soaked into a lot of people's heads, and it's a mess. Ask anybody about Firefly, and they'll say it, and I don't know. Go on, Rachel. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna riffing on that. Like, even more complicated is if you say you're playing with 4 players, you have 5 people who might have different ideas of what direction things are going in. I can't think of all the times that I've headed towards an end and thought everyone was more or less on board, and someone just has to have this side conversation with another character or has to start this other thing, like there's really time for that, and it just opens up this whole nother plot. Yeah.
I mean, you could do what Rich did at the beginning of this hangout, which is you could be like, great, you could have your side conversation. You have 90 seconds for that side conversation. And in fact, here's my iPhone. Go.
I might do that.
It's pretty effective. And we had 2 people who had 15 seconds left over. So, all right. Well, Jen, you've been awful quiet. Any thoughts bubbling around?
No, I'm always quiet. These people know what they're talking about. Like, what do I add to that? You guys are very smart.
You added a lot.
My takeaway on this, though, right, is that it's important to have endings. It's important to have closure for characters, because otherwise, again, with TV and syndication, it just goes on and on and on, and it just gets ridiculous, and it kind of dishonors the really cool stuff you did in the beginning if you just keep on doing stuff and then you jump a shark and like. So I think closure and endings, even if they aren't necessarily the entire ending that you want, I think it's important.
Another thing that I really like in games is games that leave you with some kind of artifact of play. I feel like that's very satisfying and that helps with closure. So if you're playing a game that doesn't, I mean, you could do something really geeky like have a Secret Santa where everybody has to kind of buy the other player a cheap gift that reminds them of their character. You know, like just something to like take home to be like, hey, we did this. We did it together. We made it together. It's over. I'm going to take this little thing and I'm going to put it on my desk at work and it'll always remind me of it and you're done. It's just a nice way to end it. To have something kind of tangible.
Yeah, and sometimes that feeling of closure doesn't even happen until you are all talking about the game afterwards. That can really add a lot, especially some of the details you might have missed or not understood how much something meant to someone until you're talking about it afterwards. That can do a lot for the feeling of a game.
Yeah, and recording that conversation can be really nice too. Like, end the game and then put a recorder on the table and be like, hey, let's talk about this campaign and how awesome it was. And then, send everybody an MP3 or put it up on YouTube or keep it amongst yourselves or whatever. Anything you can do to make, I feel like we make all this imaginary stuff. And one of the many, other than the 100 reasons we've already said, is that we don't have anything. Like, there's nothing there. One of the reasons why I like to write posts about my games online is so that I can go back and look at them later and remember all these wonderful things that I did with my friends. So, like, the more you can make something is I think, the better.
And I would add to that where in, like, let's say movies are a good example, where often the endings reflect the beginning of the movie, right? And games are weird in the sense that, I mean, they're also beautiful in the sense that how the game started almost doesn't matter because all that really matters is what we remember. Right? So, like, we may have done a bunch of stuff when we started, but no one remembers that. So what people remember is the thing that's really the true beginning, right? Which is what's helpful to take a break and ask everyone, hey, what are the things that you remember the most out of the last 3 games we played, right? Or at the beginning of games, I'll often have people recap what happened in the previous game. And that's kind of an exercise in figuring out what are the things that stuck with people. What do people think is the most important? And maybe they may have missed tons of details. Maybe, like, if I'm running the game, I had all these little notes about different NPCs and locations, and maybe no one remembers that. And maybe that's great. Maybe that's a clue that those things weren't really that important, right? And then by getting feedback from the players, by focusing on what they remember, it gives you ideas of what to reincorporate.
Nice. I love the idea of going back to the beginning. I mean, I'm imagining when you were saying that, John, I was imagining like a 20th level D&D game that's about to end, and we start the game at like the Goblin hovel that was the adventure of the first, the first game. That, like, cleaning out. We cleaned out the goblins and rats out of this hole, when we were farm kids, and now look at us. And of course, one character wouldn't have been there because they came in late. So the other characters get to, like, talk about it and, like, recount it with them, and going back where you've been is really powerful. I'm running a Burning Wheel game with Rachel, and one character died, and the new character came to meet Rachel's character along the path that the dead character had gone, and it was really powerful, just like moving down through this trail and seeing how everything had changed, and having people talking about the crazy stuff that he'd done as if he was some sort of, legendary, not as if, because he had become kind of legend on the frontier, and it was really cool. It made the death really good. Pointless and awful still, but like really interesting. Going back, it can be a flashback, or it can be, I think, going back to the physical place so that the characters have time to remember, which is, I think, something that we don't often get to do, is like in character remember something crazy that happened. It's really neat. I remember I did it a lot when I was playing Unknown Armies, and we'd have therapy, and it's really, really powerful, to have a therapy session with a character who's going crazy because the magical crap they see. It's really neat. Not every character needs therapy, but anyway.
Well, and you could do that with like funerals. You can do that with wakes. Even if characters have passed, maybe they have family members they left behind. Maybe there are people they helped saved who show up to say something about the characters. I mean, there's a lot that you could do. You can reincorporate. Maybe not everyone who is with you on the journey makes it to the end, and how can you honor them when you do that final ending?
Nice. I just wrote a blog post about wakes that's going to come out this Wednesday. It's funny you should say that. Nice.
Or it's nefarious.
He's hacked your blog, I think.
Awesome. I'm glad he cares that much. I'm just flattered, honestly.
Well, speaking of ending things, I think perhaps we should move to close here. Rachel, did you have any other lasting questions since you were so good to come on?
I think we cover a lot of good stuff.
I think so too. Well, thank you so much, Jen, John, Judd, all the J's, and Rachel. Thanks again for coming on This Imaginary Life. And if you have any questions, if you have anything that you'd like for us to talk about, problems at your table, let us know. You can contact us through Indie Plus or any of the individuals here. Google Plus is a great place to catch all of us. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.